Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. My name is Renee Barasa, and I'm the Director of Communication and Education here at the Interstate Commission on the Potomac River Basin. We're also known as ICPRB, which you will hear a lot this morning. We are excited you're joining us for today's webinar, Water Impacts from Data Centers in the Potomac River Basin. It is the second in our five-part webinar series celebrating our 85th anniversary. You see on the screen the dates and subject matter of our future webinars, and if you'd like to sign up for those, please visit potomacriver.org/webinars. I'm going to cover some logistics while folks are rolling in, and then I'll introduce our speakers. Not surprisingly, we're expecting a fairly large crowd for this webinar, so we'll give them some time to join us. That being said, to save anyone's embarrassment, you will not have the ability to come off mute or turn on your video during the main part of the presentation. However, once the presentation is over, we will change the settings and you will be able to come off mute and turn on your video to ask a question. And we encourage you to join the conversation at that time. In the meantime, if you have a question during the presentation, please put it in the chat and we'll address it at the end. The webinar is being recorded and will be sent to you via email later today, as well as posted on our YouTube channel. Folks are still rolling in. I'm going to launch a little poll to get us started. All right, you should see on your screen the question: when ICPRB was founded in 1940, what was considered the biggest threat to the Potomac River? So take a guess, and then we'll give you an answer. While you're answering the poll, I wanted to introduce our speaker, who is Dr. Alma Matusek. She is a senior water resources scientist at ICPRB. She works at the intersection of hydrology, climate resilience, and water resources management, applying hydrologic modeling, GIS, remote sensing, and data science to address challenges in water availability, infrastructure planning, and resource sustainability. Her recent work includes developing machine learning models for short-term urban water demand and assessing the water use impacts of emerging sectors such as data centers, which brings us here today. At this point, I'm going to introduce Michael Nutter-Lilly, the Executive Director of ICPRB. He's going to give us a short history and overview of the organization, as well as background on ICPRB's section for cooperative water supply operations on the Potomac.
Thank you very much, Renee. Yes, I'm Mike Nutter-Lilly. I'm the Executive Director of ICPRB, and I'm going to give the answer to the poll. You had four choices there: agricultural runoff, PFAS, untreated sewage, and then finally climate variability. Not surprisingly, the correct answer is untreated sewage. Our first report highlighted the need for water treatment plants up and down the Potomac, and that has come to pass. And so it was really a beginning of us to address sewage as a major issue. Okay, next slide. So the Potomac watershed is part of a larger watershed called the Chesapeake Bay watershed. The Potomac River watershed goes from Gettysburg in the north, Point Lookout in the east, Fairfax Stone in the west, and then in the south all the way down to Stanton, Virginia. It's about 14,670 square miles, and it's roughly the size of Switzerland. So it provides about 25% of the fresh water that flows into the Chesapeake Bay. And so you see the full Chesapeake Bay watershed there. Next slide. Oh, go back one. Yeah. So we were approved by Congress in 1940 as an interstate compact for the purpose of regulating, controlling, or preventing the pollution of the waters of the Potomac drainage area by sewage and industrial and other wastes. Those of you who may remember your history, the Constitution requires the approval of Congress whenever two or more states get together and form an agreement. And that is what the jurisdictions within the Potomac River watershed did back in 1940. Now, in 1970, the ICPRB's compact was amended to include water resources and related land use. The signatory jurisdictions to the compact are Maryland, Virginia, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, and the District of Columbia. But importantly, not the United States. The United States is not a signatory to our compact, so we're a little different than other river basin commissions, such as the Susquehanna and the Delaware, in that the federal government is not a signatory to our compact. We are just an agreement among the states, not an agreement between the states and the federal government. Importantly, we have no regulatory authority. So what we have done over the years is do a number of reports, and these have become very influential and have moved the states in the direction of water quality and water improvements and things of that nature. So next slide. So the four main focus areas, you think about it as a table, we have four legs. The first one is drinking water and water resources. The second one is water quality itself. The third one is aquatic life, and the fourth one is communication and education. So now today's webinar falls under the first bullet point, drinking water, and Dr. Seck will share her research on data centers in the Potomac River Basin. So Dr. Seck.
Thank you, Michael. I'm going to share my slides.
Oh, well, do you want to do this one or shall I?
Oh, did you have one more slide to?
Yeah, I think there was one more
discuss?
slide there.
Okay, all
Yeah.
right. So let me stop sharing and you'll go back to your slide.
Yeah, my bad.
No problem.
Let's see. No?
There you go.
Okay,
So Renee, could you bring back Mike's slides, please?
There it is. Yeah, sorry about that. So the drivers of the current water supply system, going back to 1851, there was a fire at the Library of Congress, and the Congress recognized that there was no water to put out the fire. So they entrusted the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to build what was called the Washington Aqueduct to bring water from Great Falls and Little Falls down into D.C., first to put out fires, but also then to provide drinking water. There have been severe historical droughts in the basin. 1930 with the Dust Bowl era. 1966 was the lowest recorded river flow ever. And then in 2002, we had a minor drought. But drought is always a possibility in the basin. So in 1960s and 70s, there was concern because there was rising regional water demand, the federal interest in the Washington Aqueduct supply, and then also the fact that we were the last straws in the river, and what happened upstream affects us. And we also were concerned because critical federal facilities, including the Congress, the president, of course, and then also across the river in Arlington is the Pentagon. So all of those institutions are dependent on the water supply of the Potomac River. This is a photograph of the Occoquan Reservoir, which is a backup water supply system for Fairfax Water, which was taken in 1966 during the drought of that era. Okay. Okay, now I will turn it over to Dr. Seck.
Thank you. All right, let me share the slides again. Okay, can you see my slides?
Yes. Yes. Oh.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us on this webinar series. I'm pleased to discuss today a topic that we've been thinking about and working on for the past year or so, the water impact from data center. This is part of a larger study, the water demand and resource availability study. And so this was a component of that larger study, and I'll discuss some elements of it. So as an overview, I will first start with the Washington metropolitan area water supply system, then talk about how data centers use water in general, and then our current data center water use estimates, projection of water use by data centers that we've developed, and further considerations. So the Potomac Basin, as Mike talked about earlier, you can see on the map to the left, it's outlined in green, covers an area of about 14,000 square miles in Pennsylvania, Maryland, West Virginia, and the District of Columbia, with a population of about 6.1 million. And the Potomac River is the primary drinking water source for the Washington metropolitan area, with about 75% of the metro area water supply coming from the river upstream of Little Falls Dam. And I show in orange there the Washington metropolitan area service areas. In August, the water demand for those service area is about 600 million gallons per day. And for context, the median river flow above the intakes is roughly 2,000 million gallons per day, and the fifth percentile flow is 900 million gallons per day. So typically, there is sufficient water available to sustain that demands, but there has been periods in the past where droughts have occurred, and there are chances in the future of meteorological changes that may affect availability of water resources. And we've worked on that over the past few years with studies on how temperature affects a river flow, study that was led by Dr. Sherry Schultz, and evaluated also how groundwater plays a part into low flows and regional groundwater trends using remote sensing data. So the water supply system benefits from a long story or long history of cooperative management. This dates from the 1980s, where agreements were signed that established the Washington Metropolitan Area Cooperative System of Water Supply Management, Co-op, which includes share funding and use of regional resources, coordinated operations during periods of drought, and regular joint planning studies. The co-op suppliers jointly pay the capital and operating costs of Little Seneca Reservoir, Savage Reservoir, Jennings Randolph Reservoir, and these reservoirs are used during drought to augment the natural flow of the Potomac River to meet the demand, as well as maintain 100 million gallons per day flow by at Little Falls. Together, these reservoirs amount to about 17 billion gallons of storage upstream of Potomac River intakes that is designated solely for water supply purposes. So in addition to drought management or demand management and overseeing reservoir releases during drought, our role at Co-op is to conduct water demand and availability studies every 5 years. So the current year study, the 2025 study, is a larger study which will be released soon, hopefully in the coming weeks. And it is conducted by ICPRB Co-op on behalf of the co-op utilities and with input from many utilities and regional partners in the region. And this study will be the subject of a webinar on December 9 by Dr. Schultz. And so for the study, we use a scenario planning approach, and we don't devise scenarios for every single component of the study or all the inputs, because that would lead to a large and intractable number of scenarios. But we do evaluate two key aspects: different demand scenarios and different climate change scenarios. And for the first time in this iteration of the study, we accounted for data centers, mainly in the upstream consumptive use, and in parts in current and future Washington metropolitan area demands, because we devise demand scenarios, high demands, medium demands, and low demands. And the high demand scenarios would include the expected expansion of data centers. So today I will focus on quantifying what that data center water use is, and the reliability outcomes for the entire system will be discussed in a future webinar. So I mentioned upstream consumptive use. That is defined as the water withdrawn upstream but not returned to the basin due to different processes such as evaporation, consumption, or diversion. And upstream consumptive use is an important component of the overall water balance because it reduces river flow before it reaches downstream, and it affects, therefore, availability at the Washington metro area intakes. Our estimate of consumptive use is 107 million gallons per day annually, and it tends to increase during the summer at 125 million gallons per day. As you can see on the pie chart to the right, upstream consumptive use is in our area dominated by irrigation, livestock, public water supply, self-supplied domestic uses, and in our area, power plant, thermoelectric power plant, or hydroelectric power plant are not the largest consumptive uses. So now talking about data centers. So data centers are facilities that house and process and share large amounts of digital information. So that definition includes closet-size servers, edge data centers, colocation facilities to the newer hyperscale facilities that are built or operated by major tech companies. And they are really at the core of the global digital infrastructure. We all rely on data centers every day, from sending emails to attending this webinar to cloud computing, or any other aspect of the digital economy. And the industry has experienced rapid growth since in recent years, driven in part by AI. And in the regions where it is established or getting established, it is sought to drive economic growth through capital investments, tax revenue, and job creation. It is currently driving very large investment and infrastructure expansion. Whether the expected outcome, which hinges on the widespread adoption of AI, that remains an open question. But this development definitely raises question about resilience and resource sustainabilities. There are questions related to their high energy consumption, which creates challenges for the power grid, and concern about rate increase. And there are also other environmental footprint aspects, such as noise and air pollution, water demand, and water quality issues. In our area in particular, this is very relevant. This chart shows the data center inventory by market. This is for the world. And you can see that the US dominates the global data center market. And Virginia, particularly Northern Virginia, is far ahead of anywhere else in the world. And so the Potomac Basin is home to the Data Center Alley in Loudoun County, which is thought to be the highest concentration of data centers in the world. There is a vigorous market in Prince William County and large developments in Frederick County, in Montgomery County, Maryland as well. So, so this graph illustrates how we think about data centers and their intersection with the broader water infrastructure and the hydrological cycle. Data centers rely on water primarily for cooling, and depending on the technology used, some of that water evaporates from cooling towers. They also generate wastewater, which is often routed through the sewer system, the wastewater treatment plants, and eventually discharged back into the river. In some cases, the facilities may discharge directly to a water body, which require a National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, NPDES permit under the Clean Water Act, and that is administered by the EPA and delegated to the states. Some of the contaminant of concerns include salts, biocides, metals, corrosion inhibitors, and in some cases, depending on the cooling technology, thermal pollution can also be an issue. But focusing on water quantity, which has been the subject of our analysis, we can see that they may withdraw from groundwater or surface water sources, but for the most part, and this is a case in our area in particular, they are generally supplied by municipalities, public water suppliers. Another aspect of how they intersect with the water cycle is through energy consumption. You can see to the left here, this representation of a power plant. And so whatever infrastructure is used to provide power generally uses water and discharges water. And so typically we think of data center using water in terms of direct water use from cooling. So to the left here is an example of the water evaporating from a data center in Oregon. This is a Google data center. And then to the right, indirect water use is also something to consider, where the power plants providing the power to the data center also uses water. And there is an inherent trade-off here. Optimizing one resource often increases demand for the other. For example, switching to air cooling saves water, but it uses more energy. And improving energy efficiency with evaporative cooling saves power, but it increases water use. And when you increase energy, you also tend to increase indirect water use. So talking about cooling technologies, there are different methods that data centers operate on. Our air cooling is a pretty popular and traditional method where they use convection, basically chilled air, or sometimes just the outdoor air if the temperature is low enough to cool the racks, the server racks. And it's a simple but less efficient method of cooling. Evaporative cooling is one also that is used often, and it uses water to remove heat, and it tends to lower energy use but increases water consumption. There is a direct to chip methods where they circulate fluids around the chips and the rack. And this tends to lower the water footprint, and it's often used in combination with other methods. So it's generally a hybrid configuration, an inclusive configuration. So these systems would generally combine air and liquid cooling, and may recirculate water to minimize loss. There are also emerging approaches such as immersion cooling, where the racks are submerged in a dielectric fluid So that doesn't have a big water footprint. And there are other waste heat recovery where the heat is being used for other purposes and plume capture systems. So metrics that are generally used to evaluate how efficient data centers are in terms of their power usage and their water usage. The power usage effectiveness, PUE, and the water usage effectiveness. So PUE is the total data center energy divided by the IT equipment energy, and an equivalent metric, the water usage effectiveness, WUE, is the data center water consumption divided by the IT equipment energy. And that water usage effectiveness, which we used as the basis for our analysis, is variable. It depends. So this is from a study that was done by Lawrence Berkeley National Lab in 2024, where they evaluated this metric for different types of data centers and different sizes of data centers. So this WUE varies. Generally, so if you use a water cooled chiller, they tend to be larger. And they tend to be smaller for, dry coolers using air or other methods. It also varies depending on where you are located in the climate in that area. This was a study that was done by University of California, Riverside. And you can see here for Virginia, we tend to be on the lower side of the water usage effectiveness. This is just another representation of that, of that same information with a study by Siddiq et al. In 2024, where they evaluated the effectiveness of data centers depending on where you are located. And again, in the Potomac Basin, we tend to be on the lower side of the range. So there is a growing body of literature on data center water use, but most of the studies on data centers still tend to focus on energy, or they would examine things at a national level. Very few tend to look at things at the basin scale, which is where management decisions actually occur. So understanding water use at this scale is important because rivers and aquifer are shared resources, and utilities, industries, ecosystem all depend on that same system. So the basin perspective really helps connect the local withdrawals to the regional availability and resilience. And so there were previous studies that looked at nationally the footprint of data centers, studied by the Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, found that data center water use was 15 million gallons per day in 2014 to 48 million gallons per day in 2023. A study done by J. Lark also in 2024 showed that in Virginia, data centers consume 6 million gallons per day. And to our knowledge, basin scale assessment have been limited, so this work helps fill that gap. So our goal was to quantify how much data centers use directly for cooling. In this analysis, we do not account for indirect water use because this is evaluated elsewhere in the study. If you remember when I showed a pie chart, we evaluate in the demand study the consumptive use of other sectors upstream, including power. And another complication is that in the basin, we tend to be an importer of energy. And so electricity that data centers use in the basin may be actually produced somewhere else. And so they don't for the water balance or the water use in the region. So we consider two main cooling methods, a water-intensive cooling method where water is used to absorb heat, And a large portion of that is lost through evaporation and a non-water intensive approach, generally air cooling. Now, in practice, many data centers use hybrid cooling. They also sometimes use reclaimed water, and that reduces the potable demand, but it's still considered consumptive because that's water that would otherwise be released to the river and be available for downstream users. And so we relied on our relationship with utilities to obtain data center water use. So these are just some numbers that we came across. So the average use per facility were 38,000 gallons per day per facility. This data by Fairfax Water. 42,000 gallons per facility is data by Loudoun Water in 2023. So these are average numbers, and this would correspond to the water use of a medium-sized hospital. In practice, though, this is the average, and the range can vary significantly depending on the size of the data center, but also the type of cooling that they use. Two metrics that we were very interested in were the use per facility and the use per megawatt. And this is what we ended up using as a basis for our study. And to evaluate that use per megawatt, what we did is that we use permitted backup generator capacity. So data centers tend to have generators, and for that they need air permits. It's one of the things that is that requires a permit. So that means a source of data. So Virginia Department of Environment Quality publishes these permits online, and these were created by J. Lark. And so we, that's what you see here to the right. Each point show a data center, and the colors scale shows the total megawatt capacity of the generator. And from this generator capacity, we were able to determine the IT load, so how much demand the IT component use. And we also use for service areas where this was available, the withdrawal totals of data centers per service area. And our approach was to derive a basin average water use per unit power demand for an average day and peak day. So that would be basically how much water was used by the service area divided by the IT load of that service area, the total IT load of that service area. And from that, we can determine the basin-wide consumptive use. And this is provided by this simple formula here. Consumptive use is equal to the effective power demand multiplied by the water use per power demand, which is equivalent to the water use efficiency, which I talked about earlier, multiplied by the consumptive use factor. And the effective power demand, as I mentioned, came from the total backup power capacity multiplied by redundancy and utilization factor, and the power usage efficiency, which are factors that tells you how efficient the data center is, how much of the total power they use, etc. So here, just for an example, and this is a real data center that's in the basin that has been online not for too long, and we're able to get their water use from a corporate a sustainability report. So we verified our calculation against what was reported by the data center owner. So we would assume a 250 megawatt rated power, and this data center uses water. So the WE So this is one site. So the WE is 2,400 gallons per megawatt per day. And so with the calculation, that comes up to this amount of consumptive use, about 0.3 million gallons per day. So for a 250 megawatt data center, using water in the summer at least, it comes up to about 0.3 million gallons per day. Interesting aspect of data center water use patterns is also the temporal variability of it. This shows the monthly factors of data center water use for two service areas in the basin. In blue is the service areas where we have the most data centers, but it's a more mature market. And in orange is a service areas with less data center, but newer data centers, more hyperscale data centers. And what we found is that for that service area, the water use tend to be really low in the summer. So basically less than 1 means that it uses less water than average in the summer. And then it goes up to 3 or close to 3 in August and September. And so when we are balancing demands, variability is not something that you want. We tend to like when things are more stable. And so I think this is something that we'll have to think about in the future as the number of data centers increases, thinking about operationally how they work. For the data center water use projection, we derive two scenarios: a cooling technology scenario, which is based on the ratio of how many data centers in the area use water cooling versus how many use air cooling. Currently, in one of the service areas, about 60% of data centers use water cooling and 40% use air cooling. In the other newer service areas, about 80% of data centers use water and 20% use air cooling. So we devised these three scenarios because it's hard to tell what's going to happen in the future. So this reflects the uncertainty in technology adoption in the future. We also derived energy projection, and this was based on the JLARC study, and we used their three energy projection. The middle one is the EJM, which is the grid administrator, and they have forecasts that they release every year, and our study is based on their 2024 forecast, which is the result I'm going to show here. But there are also, my point is, there are also other energy growth scenarios here. So the result, this shows data center water use as a proportion of the total water use in the basin. So this is at the basin scale, and this is just the withdrawals, not the consumptive use. And what we found with the data centers water use at the basin scale currently is about 0.3%. The withdrawals are dominated in the area by hydroelectric power plants and public water supply. Excuse me. This shows the average consumptive use at the basin scale, and you can see that the picture changes a little bit. For the average consumptive use, data centers account for 3% of the water use in the basin, and consumptive use is dominated by agriculture, irrigation, livestock, and public water supply. And you can see that the consumptive use of data centers is low, but comparable to other users, established users, such as industrial, commercial, agriculture, So it is emerging as a use type of its own. This is looking at things spatially, and I think the important thing to take from this is that the effects are often very local. You can see here this is a sub-basin that is located in the Loudon Water Service area, and this is part of the Prince William Service area. And in total, the withdrawals are 6.3 million gallons per day, and the consumptive use 4.7 million gallons per day. That's on average. If we look at things for the peak day, it increases. So the total for the basin is about 20 million gallons per day, and the consumptive use about 15 million gallons per day. If we think about these numbers in terms of relative terms, relative to the Washington metropolitan area, the withdrawals of data centers account for 1% of the annual Washington metropolitan area withdrawals. If we think about it in terms of consumptive use, they account for 9% of annual consumptive use and 12% of August consumptive use. This graph shows the future data center consumptive use. At the top, so we divided it between the Washington metro area and the upstream area. For the Washington metropolitan area, we find that data center consumptive use rises from about 4 million gallons per day currently to 22 million gallons per day in 2050. And again, this is using the 2024 PJM forecast, and the bands that you see here shows the scenario range, the cooling technology scenario range. The bottom graph is upstream consumptive use, which grows, but not as much as, or the total aren't as large as for the Washington metro area. This shows the proportion of data center water use compared to other or public water supply in the Washington metropolitan area. So to the left here is the total withdrawals for non-data center water use, and so that's the light blue, and the dark blue is data centers water use. The bottom graph shows the percentage. So we go from about 1% to about 5% in 2050. Now, if we look at the consumption, meaning the amount of the water that is withdrawn and returned, currently looking at percentages, I think is more useful. It grows from 8 to 9% in 2025 to about 30% of the consumptive use in 2050. And again, this is for the medium PJM forecast. And this graph in particular is for the medium cooling technology scenario as well. So it's quite substantial by growth by 2050. So another aspect is the peak, looking at the peak. So again, the top graph is the Washington metropolitan area. The bottom is the upstream. And so the y-axis is the peak day consumptive use. So currently we go from 14 million gallons per day to 2050, about 80 million gallons per day. This is for the Washington metro area. And upstream, currently negligible to about 16 million gallons per day. So these are quite large numbers. And it can have several implications in terms of reliability of the system, but also in terms of the flows, because more consumptive use generally will means more lower flows, less volumes, less dilution. and more concentration of solutes, including chloride and other contaminants of concern. So even think about things beyond the water quantity. This is something that merits attention and further research. And still talking about that peak demand, I talked about how there is a large seasonal variability, and so that's what leads to these high peak numbers. And these are very relevant to our drought operations. So this shows the flows and threshold in the Potomac River from June to October 2023. This is the last time we were in drought operations, and all this graph, what this graph illustrates is that during droughts is this is the time where the flows are lowest. This is the time where the demands are highest, and having these high peak demand in the future would certainly create some challenges in managing the resource. I'll say that in all the high demand scenarios, which would be in line with data centers development, our studies identify reliability issues in 2050 with climate change. But this is without accounting for potential future mitigation measures, some of which are currently being considered, such as the secondary storage or secondary source. So key takeaways, we evaluated a regional basin scale analysis of data center water use in the Potomac Basin. We found that currently the impact is modest at basin scale, but it is emerging as a distinct new water use sector. In the future, there is likely substantial growth, but this depends on cooling technology and whether the power demand trajectories materialize. And managing data centers in the future will require balancing energy, water, regulation, and infrastructure constraint under high uncertainty. And to that effect, there are a number of levers, a number of strategies that can be strategies that can be put in place. One being data transparency. One of the challenges that we faced in the beginning of this investigation was data availability. And so having daily water use data, average and peak, will be needed to assess the impact on river flow and storage option. And having also energy use data would be useful, matching the time resolution of the water use data. This is even more important now that we're talking about a growth of off-grid systems that may bypass energy utility reporting and create data gaps. In terms of policy, state-level consumptive use in Virginia and Maryland may apply as data center withdrawals increase in the basin. Currently, these upstream consumptive use regulation tend to not apply to data centers because they often are supplied by municipalities. And so thinking about this policy aspect would be important. Finally, innovations. There are a number of innovation technologies going on related to software, green coding, optimizing the code and algorithm to reduce energy use and thus water use, efficient data management in modeling, in training the AI model, hardware, innovation, energy efficient chips and servers, efficiencies in cooling technologies, recycling. I want to show here to the right, this is plume capture technology that was developed in MIT in 2018. So it's a patent, and this company, Infinite Cooling, has since been applying it to different areas. In some example are the Susquehanna River Basin. They've applied it to power plants. They have also applied it in France, with the French energy company EDF. So these are some things to consider in the future as we deal with this issue. So in summary, there are levers for resilience in managing data centers' water use in the future: policy and reporting measures, technological measures, operational measures, and planning measures. I'd like to acknowledge my co-authors on this part of the study, Sherry Scholl, Sarah Ahmed, Stephanie Newmer, and the many organizations and utilities that have contributed data, insight, and thoughtful engagement throughout this process. I'd like to particularly thank Pam Kennel and Darren Geldert at Loudon Water, and Nathan Griffin and Dave Guerra at Prince William Water, and Ken Lanfear. And I think that's what I had for today. Yep, thank you. And I'm happy to take questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Alamatu. Sounds like somebody has unmuted themselves already. I was going to let you know.
I have one question. This is Mary Miller. And I live on a well, and I was wondering what the impact of data center would have on my aquifer. Can you answer that?
Sure. Thank you for the question. I think that will depend on whether they withdraw directly from groundwater. To my knowledge, data centers in the area tend to be supplied by public water suppliers. There are some plans for some data centers to withdraw from rivers. I haven't come across any data centers withdrawing directly from the aquifers, but yeah, it will depend on where they withdraw the water from.
Thank you.
There was something in the news the other day about data center construction possibly having some impacts on groundwater, but that's all I can say on that. So I'm going to let Dr. Stuck take a breath because that was a lot of information. Thank you so much. I'm going to read a comment from Noreen that's just kind of a reminder that the impacts of data centers are not just water consumption, but also impacts to our water cycle due to the land use. She noted that another impact on the watershed is they clear cut forests to build the centers. Trees cool the atmosphere and absorb stormwater. Cutting them down contributes to climate warming and creates more demand on resources to cool homes and data centers, not to mention increases in flooding, which goes into the Potomac.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's a great comment. And going back to my slide on the water cycle, and yes, that's exactly correct. Data centers are it's new urban development, so they definitely have an impact on the permeability and can impact infiltration, recharge. So yes, these are important considerations that may have impacts more likely on a local scale, but should certainly be evaluated.
We had one interesting idea. Do data centers ever consider building underground to reduce the amount of cooling required? It also maintains the cultural landscape above.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. I haven't seen that. I've heard of submerge data centers, ideas where they would submerge them underwater. But yeah, I don't know to what extent that is practiced anywhere in the world, but yeah, good idea.
We have a general water use question too. Of the average use per day of water use in the basin, are there estimates of how much per day is discharged to sewer or bodies of water?
Yes, so in our analysis, we used withdrawals from utilities, used withdrawal data from utilities, and we assume that about 75% of the water that is withdrawn is lost to the system, and so the rest would be returning to the source.
Are water and electric utilities thinking about special pricing schemes for data centers to incentivize certain levels of use? I don't know if that's something that we can answer, but I'll give you a chance.
Not that I'm aware of, but yeah, good question. Looks like there's some questions on, some people are raising their hands.
Yeah, Ken, do you want to come off? You were number one to raise your hand. You want to come off mute and ask your question?
Your water consumption estimates for the data centers, they clearly assume a fairly strong use of hybrid systems. That is, most of the energy is discharged by to air and rather than water systems. And that's probably one of the reasons that the consumption goes way up in the summertime, because the air systems become less efficient. I wonder how confident you are that those numbers represent the new and larger data centers that we're starting to see today. Any indication there?
Yeah, I think so this is part of the reason why we devise different scenarios. So the medium scenario is based on a 60 to 40% ratio, where 60% of data centers use water and 40% use energy. Currently, in one of the service areas, that ratio is 80 to 20. So 80% of data centers using water and 20% using air. And that is our, I guess, higher end scenarios for cooling technology adoption.
Yeah, I noticed that one of EQAC's recommendations, the Environmental Quality Advisory Council of Fairfax County, is that any new data centers that are permitted should agree to a reduction of water supply during periods of drought. Now, that's yet to be implemented. It's just a recommendation, but it's one of the ways of looking at this issue of what happens when we normally we have plenty of water to handle the data centers, but when we have the drought conditions, it's another matter altogether.
Yep. Yeah, I totally agree. Those, drought conditions tend to be currently, or the summer times tend to be where drought conditions worsen. And unfortunately, that is the time when water consumption by data centers tend to be higher as well. So that is I think it's a great recommendation.
Well, thank you. Good studies.
Thank you, Ken. Larry, would you like to come off mute and ask your question?
Sure. Thank you so much. Well, first of all, I'd like to say that this was a very informative presentation. I really appreciated it. But my question is, have you planned to undertake some outreach, particularly for the data center industry? As you pointed out, the use of water is really a balance between using more energy and water. And if they appreciate the fact that the information you provided here, I think really lets them know that water is a limited resource in the area, and they can't all rely on evaporative cooling. And And I think some of your numbers, to be quite frank with you, could be conservative because evaporative cooling and water cooling are going to be the cheapest. And so if they think they can save money, they're going to go for that efficiency. But if they think that there's not the capacity to provide the water they need, then they're going to move towards electricity.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think one of the reason why they tend to lean on evaporative cooling is that it's cheaper because water is often seen as cheaper than power. And there's also just a general impression that in our area, there is plenty of resource. Water is plentiful. And although that is, often true, there are definitely times of the year and most likely in the future where that will not be the case. And I think that, as you mentioned, reaching out to the industry, the tech industry, and the data center industry is something that to consider, and that would be a great approach. I think this issue will require synergies between different players, including the tech industry.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Mika or Micah, I don't know how to pronounce your name, sorry, if you'd like to come off mute and ask the question.
Thank you. And Alma too, thank you. This was a wonderful presentation. My takeaway is that, looking at 2050 under a normative scenario or climate change scenario, we're running into water stress in the basin. And I was hoping you could expound upon that a little bit. Is that in terms of an increasing number of low flow days where we our withdrawal, essentially no longer provides for ecological base flow in the river. Can you share a little bit more about what that means in terms of maybe numbers of days of stress, and then really what your reference point is? Is that low flow or is that something more severe?
Yeah, so the climate scenarios that we devise have to do with increase in precipitation, but also increase in temperature and how that increase in temperature affects river flow. So we have three scenarios, high flow, medium flow, and low flows. But we will also evaluated how reliability would look like with no changes to climate change, to climate. And so our reliability metrics have to do with how many days we don't meet the flow by, how much water is left in the reservoir, and is demand met reliably. So in that regard, there's a range of metrics that we look at to evaluate whether the system is reliable or not. And in terms of the climate change, we use different scenarios based on how we expect temperature to affect stream flow. In our region, it is expected that precipitation is going to increase, but even with that increase in precipitation, temperature may increase evapotranspiration and therefore lower flows. I'd like to mention that Dr. Sherry Schultz will be giving a webinar on the subject on December 9th. So she'll talk about the climate analysis and how that translates into system reliability.
Great, thank you. We did have some questions about kind of permitting. So who makes the call on Virginia or Maryland reducing Potomac withdrawals in 2030 when summer demand is greatest and when river flows could be minimal? And also on that same kind of question, are you saying that state and local permitting agencies should require data centers to disclose how much water they expect to use and the sources of the water they will use?
I think that's a conversation that should happen. I think it would be useful to have data centers disclose their water and energy use. In terms of permitting, there are already, consumptive use regulation and withdrawal permits in place. But the challenge is a lot of time data centers are supplied by public water suppliers. So the permit doesn't specifically apply to them. And so they kind of are under the umbrella of another user. So that makes it difficult to track, the aggregate impact of all these individual facilities. But yes, I think it would be very useful to have more reporting, more disclosure. And this is something that some states are leading on this effort. I know that Minnesota recently put in place some regulation for data center disclosure after a certain for certain size data centers. New York and New Jersey also this year have put in place regulations to for data centers to disclose their water usage and energy usage.
Interesting. And there was another question from Nancy. Are there other water sources that could better support the high demand in our area? A recent data center that was approved in King George, Virginia, stated they were going to truck in water from another source in an effort to minimize their impact locally.
Well, in the basin, the Potomac River is the main source. For some of the utilities, it's the only source. And that alone is a challenge that is being addressed. There are efforts currently led by U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, MWCOG, and ICPRB, and all the utilities in the region to secure a secondary source. Beyond that, I think it would certainly be useful, as someone mentioned before, to to present data centers with maybe different options as to how to better manage the resource and not assume that it's just something that is abundantly available at all times. I haven't heard of data centers in the area evaluating sources outside of the basin as their water supply, but that's an interesting.
Yeah. Dr. Syke, if you have to go, feel free to cut us off at any point. There's a lot of questions here. It looks like we can be talking for a while. We have one that could be a whole webinar in and of itself. But what are the procedures for addressing, excuse me, what are the procedures for addressing the challenge of demand and excess of supply within the Potomac River Basin?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? Let me.
What are the procedures for addressing the challenge of demand and excess of supply within the Potomac River Basin? So I'm thinking more like the LFAA, that type of
okay. Well, there are permits for all the utilities to. So there are withdrawal limits for any utilities or any entity that withdraw water from the river. But yes, as you mentioned, beyond that, there are also agreements that are in place in cases where the water the flows fall beyond or below a certain threshold. And that would be the low flow allocation agreement, which is in place and takes effect at sometimes when flows are low enough.
One more question. Do you have examples of how the Virginia policy regarding low flow mitigation is being applied for data centers currently? And he mentions 500,000 GPD threshold.
I don't know of any instances where it is being applied. And the reason for that is that data centers don't, in Virginia, as far as I know, don't withdraw directly from the river or any other source. They rely on public water suppliers.
I know the data centers use water for cooling. Is the water then cooled before it's returned to the basin, the river? I'm curious how heating then returning the water affects the biodiversity in the river. And are there any studies on that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So yes, they use the water for cooling, and then that is the process by which the heat is removed, basically. So if you use evaporative cooling, you are basically spraying cold water to this hot air, and therefore removing that heat through the evaporation process. Depending on the cooling technology that is used, you may or may not have a problem with thermal pollution, which is when water at a higher temperature than expected enters the river. I think that is often more the case for one-through cooling when, depending on the discharge levels and the flow levels. From my understanding, evaporative cooling does not raise discharge temperature to the level that would require mitigation.
Okay. And I think this will be the last question, and then we'll let everyone get on with their day. Thank you again for your presentation, Dr. Seck. Is there any kind of regional land use planning capacity to ensure that the number of proposed data centers are allocated across the Potomac region in alignment with the carrying capacity of the region's resources, like a development of regional impact concept?
Not that I'm aware of, but that's certainly, I think, the type of initiatives that would be greatly needed.
Frederick County in Maryland just developed a data center overlay. So if you're interested in that, you could look more into that. So if you have decided to sign up for our newsletter when you registered for this webinar, you will get some news articles about some of the stuff we've talked about today. There's a lot of data centers in the newsletter today. But also, if you registered for the webinar, we will be sending out the slides as well as a recording probably later today, if not definitely tomorrow. So look for that in your email, and it'll be posted on our YouTube page, as well as all of the other webinars that are coming up. So with that being said, thanks again to Dr. Seck. Thanks to Serena for sharing the slides earlier, and Mr. Nardalili for doing that earlier presentation, sharing information about ICPRB. Everyone have a great afternoon. Thank you very much.